creating a sacred space for work means that you take the time and effort to make sure that it's not accessible to everyone, and that it's not always accessible to you, meaning that when you're not working, you shouldn't be in that space. Oh, hi. Michael Sherlock here, CEO of Shock Your Potential. And today I'm just taking a little time out. You may hear some of the background noise of cars going by, but the rest of this experience is completely relaxing. Over my shoulder, you see the Tahoe National Forest in California, and on a little bit of a road trip and adventure. And on this trip, I have had some time to think about burnout. Now, I'm not experiencing it at the moment, so that's good. But I decided that on this road trip, it was time to stop. I was going to say smell the roses, but there's no roses. Smell the pine trees and the redwoods, and reflect on whether or not I'm doing the right things for myself. Let me tell you why. So a couple weeks ago, a really incredible study came out. It was done by Microsoft, and they took a look at their employees who have been working remotely for a long time. And many people will continue to work remotely. We're seeing it all over the world, that a lot of jobs are remote or at least part-time, so maybe a hybrid model, sometimes in an office, sometimes working remotely. And, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, you're used to it. Many of us have been working remotely or from our home offices for years or decades. But whether or not you're an employee for a company, or you work for yourself, or you run your own company, there's something that impacts us when it comes to that isolation of working remotely. But let me go back to the study. What was interesting about the study is that it came out and talked about the fact that Americans in this study, when they started working remotely, began to work 10% on average more than they were pre-pandemic. And 10% more might not seem like a lot of time, like, well, it's 10%, Michael, what's the big deal? Well, 10% actually is leading to some really clear revelations, such as burnout, and when people achieve burnout and what it means. Now, I'm kind of an expert on burnout because I've done it 3 times. I know 3 clear instances in my career where I hit burnout. Not so much as an entrepreneur, but definitely as an employee. And that wasn't even when I was working remotely. So, why is this important to me? Well, it's important to me for a couple reasons. Because number one, I think that in order for us to work effectively and really be great contributors to our company that we work for or the businesses that we run, you have to find balance. Now, but here's the problem, is sometimes people try more of the balance of life than the balance of work. A lot of times in my efforts to make sure my employees over the years achieved work-life balance, many of them took that to be, hey, I'm going to have life balance and I'll get that work done here and there when I feel like it. And that's not helpful, because that doesn't make for a great employee. That doesn't make for a strong, healthy company. So what is this whole work-life balance, and how do we make it happen? So on this trip, I'm getting a little work done, but my husband and I are also having some adventures. That's kind of how we do it. We try and mix business and pleasure together when we can. And that means, just taking a stop at a beautiful vista overlook and, having a little lunch, which we just did. And then me getting some work done because I can tape our morning motivation for the week. But when you're working from home, whether or not you work for somebody else or an entrepreneur working for yourself, there's a couple things that you need to take into consideration to find this kind of balance, not just when you're on the road or trying to join business and pleasure together. But this is the first thing. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I wrote out five things in my magic little notebook that goes everywhere with me. The number one element to find this balance is, number one, to ask yourself, what do I really want? Now, I did a morning motivation or a potential academy, I don't know, several months ago on work-life balance. What a joke. And my whole premise was, can you really achieve it? I wanted to have a little sarcasm, and I do agree that you can. But I continue to think about this. So when I say what really is important to you, the question is, what is important to you? Having time for fitness, having time for family, being able to get your kids to school and pick them up. Those different pieces of your personal life that are impacted by your work. And when you really write them down and say, okay, what is important to me? Then you have to make some choices, because you have to figure out how to make the balance work. You have to find enough opportunity to do your job and do your job well, whatever it is. But when you know what's important to you, you also can handle some different stresses. You can handle different options. You can look at creative solutions to keep that balance going. So once you do that, then my second question for you is, where do you work? Where is your workspace? Where's your work environment in your home if you work from home? And that's a really critical question, because what I found, especially during the pandemic and with my team that works remotely 100%, is that people don't always create a sacred place. And when I use the word sacred, I use that word very, very particularly, because if something is sacred, you hold additional value to it. So if you find a sacred space in your home to become your office, then it should be your office. It shouldn't be your bedroom, your kitchen, your living room. Even if it's a corner of that space, creating a sacred space for work means that you take the time and effort to make sure that it's not accessible to everyone, and that it's not always accessible to you, meaning that when you're not working, you shouldn't be in that space. Now, this is not easy for everybody. People live in small spaces or with lots of other people. But until you say, this is my sacred workspace, people are not going to hold it sacred. It will be invaded. Which comes to the next question of, when do you work? And holding that work time sacred. When we all used to go into offices, there were business hours. 8 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever it is. Maybe you work a swing shift. But those hours are critical, because that was when you're expected to be at work and doing work. But in this, I'm going to work remotely or hybrid environment, or as an entrepreneur, sometimes those lines get blurred. The timing gets blurred. And when that blur happens, now we are, number one, not as effective. Number two, we're more prone to getting pulled away to other things that impact our work, and we're more likely to continue to work when we should be checking off and not focusing on work. There needs to be a place and a space for your work, and there needs to be a time. And those elements have to be communicated with anyone else that is in your space. Because if you say, this is my workspace and this is my work time, I need you to respect it. Now we have different outcomes. These aren't all easy, but they are important to effectiveness. And not only avoiding burnout, but to become better at what we do. Which moves me to point number 4. Plan time away and time off. One of the reasons I think this study is so interesting, and as I read it, I was really surprised. I wasn't really surprised, but I was surprised at some of the findings. But one of the elements is the fact that people are more afraid to be unplugged from work. And that might be because, what if I'm not seen as doing my job? What if I miss an important meeting? What if it looks like I'm not working? And here's the thing, if you solve the first 2 problems, the space where you work and you hold it sacred, the time when you work and you hold it sacred, you're not going to have to worry about whether or not people are thinking you're working, because you will be communicating with people what you're doing, you will be proactive, and you will be much more effective in that space and in that time. So planning time away and time off is absolutely vital, because if you don't, then the edges get blurred again, and we lose that distinction of, I am at work, I am at play, I am at rest, I am at family, I am at workout, whatever it is. But tip number 5 is just to breathe again. Normally I start with this one, but that deep breath. A breath of the moment. If you're in work mode, be in work mode. If you're in rest mode, be in rest mode. But by planning where you work, when you work, how you work, communicating it, planning your time off, and then being fully in the moment, those breaths that allow you to be fully in the moment, not only will your work be more effective, you will feel clearer, you will feel more effective. You'll also be much more satisfied, not only with your work time, but your non-work time. And so as we conclude this week of work and fun, these are the moments where you stop and say, this is a beautiful vista point. And I don't mean just stopping on a trip to look out over. I mean even to look at your work and say, this is a beautiful vista point. I see that I really dedicated myself to my space, my place, and my time. And look at what came from it. Look at the outcomes that I created because I prioritized work when it was time to prioritize work. And I prioritized family when it was time for family. And I prioritized me when it was time for me. And altogether, I am a much more complete human being. That's when we don't get burned out. That's when sometimes the work goes away. But it goes away with the sense of knowing that we've done the right things in the right ways, but mostly for the right reasons. That's what's motivating me this week. Thank you for stopping by. And as always, please remember, if you like what you hear, please subscribe to our channel. Make sure to hit the like button, that's always a good one, and leave a comment. We respond to every single one. It's been a joy being with you again. Remember, these are all tips on morning motivation of how to help you shock your potential.